For 12 years, Wu Jin suffered from an unidentifiable nightmare, tormenting him without end, a place overflowing with bizarre monsters, creatures that could never exist in reality. He had already come to understand one thing: if he died there, he would simply wake up from the dream. The pain lingered. It felt no different from truly dying. It had already been 12 years since he had been suffering from that same terrible dream. Even so, he had grown used to it. He knew now that he could endure the pain of dying, but deep down he knew there was something even more painful than death. It was sleep. Sleep had become something he could no longer rely on. Whenever he fell asleep in reality, he would be dragged straight into the nightmare world. And in that place, death was the only way out. Only by dying there could he return to reality. Because of that, there was no way he could ever sleep properly. He was beyond tired, but rest was something he could never truly have. To avoid dying in that endless, miserable dream, he forced himself to learn everything he could. He trained relentlessly: weapon skills, martial arts, swordsmanship, jungle survival, even war tactics. Every possible method that could increase his chances of survival, he mastered. For 12 long years, he pushed himself without rest, doing everything within his power. Because of that effort, he began to die less often in the nightmare. But even so, the fundamental problem had never changed. It was still sleep. He also consulted a doctor about his strange condition, but she didn't know the cause of his weird nightmare and advised him to find something he truly wanted to do. If he did, maybe he would finally be able to sleep well. But no matter how much Wu Jin thought about it, the only thing that came to him was painfully simple. All he wanted was to fall asleep. Just once, he wanted to experience deep, peaceful sleep. He stood there in silence, his head slightly tilted back, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Then suddenly, something felt off. He froze, confused, as blood suddenly poured from his nose, dripping down his lips and onto his hand. A faint sound escaped him as his vision blurred. His eyes trembled, unable to understand what was happening. Darkness crept in, and in the next moment his body collapsed heavily onto the floor, lifeless, blood spreading beneath him. Then a strange sensation followed. His consciousness lingered, and a thought surfaced in confusion. His body felt light. For the first time in what felt like forever, that constant crushing headache had disappeared. Instead, a calm sensation filled him. It felt as if clean, fresh air was flowing into his chest and mind. Everything felt peaceful. It felt as though he had finally slept well. For the first time in 12 years, a thought surfaced in his mind, heavy with disbelief. He wondered if he had actually died. As his vision adjusted to the unfamiliar surroundings, another realization slowly formed. If that was true, then this place was the same nightmare world that had tormented him for 12 long years. And if he died here, there would be no returning to reality. From that moment on, he accepted it. This place was his reality. He lifted his gaze slightly, his eyes sharpening with understanding. He knew very well what this place was, and more importantly, what he had to do to survive. Given the situation, he made a clear decision: fighting right now would be a mistake. His eyes narrowed as he carefully assessed everything around him. First, he needed to move. Somewhere bright, somewhere the monsters didn't like to go. For a moment, he remained silent, his expression calm yet resolute. A sudden sensation surged through his body as he tightened his grip, the blade gleaming faintly. He paused for a brief moment, confused by the strange feeling rising within him. He wondered what it was. Instead of fear, something else filled his chest. He realized that he didn't want to run away. Without hesitation, he pushed off the ground and leapt forward, his body moving instinctively toward the monster. Even as the creature reacted in shock, he continued forward. A thought crossed his mind. Perhaps it was because he had finally gotten proper rest after so long. Or maybe it was because this body was younger than his original one. Before he could fully understand it, the monster lunged violently toward him, its massive form crashing down with overwhelming force. Its jaws opened wide, roaring as it aimed to devour him. At that moment, everything became clear. His entire body was screaming, not in fear but urging him to fight. A sharp glint flashed across his eyes as his gaze turned cold and focused. A single thought echoed in his mind: he had to survive. In the next instant, his blade moved. With a clean, decisive strike, he cut straight through the monster's attack, severing it in one motion. Blood burst into the air, splattering across his cloak as he followed through without hesitation. His body moved smoothly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Behind him, the monster staggered, its massive body losing strength as the wound deepened. The creature let out a final distorted cry before collapsing heavily onto the ground. He stood still, gripping his weapon tightly, his cloak fluttering slightly in the aftermath. Then, slowly he lowered himself, planting the sword into the ground as he steadied his breathing. With a sharp, final motion, the blade pierced deep into the monster's body, tearing through its flesh as a strange blue glow spilled out from within. He reached forward without hesitation and pulled out a glowing orb, its surface pulsing with an eerie light as blood dripped around it. Holding the orb in his hand, he stared at it calmly, his expression steady despite the blood smeared across his face. Then, without a second thought, he raised it to his mouth. A quiet sound escaped as he bit into it. The surface burst open, and the liquid inside spilled out, mixing with the blood as he consumed it. Afterward, he stood still, his cloak swaying slightly in the forest breeze. The fallen monster lay motionless at his feet, while he remained standing, silent and composed, as if this brutal act was nothing more than routine. In that dark fantasy world, he stood with blood staining his lips, his eyes glowing faintly with a cold determination. He made a silent promise to himself. No matter what happened, he would survive. But before anything else, he knew what he had to do. Without hesitation, he began moving forward, his steps steady as he left the darkness behind. His destination was clear. He would head toward a place filled with light, somewhere brighter. Sometime later, he rested against a tree, the quiet forest surrounding him. Lately, his days had been peaceful. He had been sleeping well without interruption. It had already been a month since he arrived in this place. During that time, he kept moving forward, pushing through the pitch-black darkness, always chasing the light ahead. And now, even when the urge to fight surfaced within him, he remained calm. He did not consider himself someone who hunted for the thrill of it. To him, risking one's life for fun was nothing short of madness. Hidden behind the tree, he observed quietly as a winged beast feasted on its prey, its jaws stained with blood. A faint thought crossed his mind. Despite everything, he still could not completely suppress the urge to fight. Even so, he reminded himself that he only hunted when it was necessary, when he needed food. And right now he was getting hungry. With a swift and precise strike, he lunged forward, his blade cutting cleanly through the demon beast in a single motion. He knew that moments like this were when he could gain something more, something beyond survival. Within the bodies of demon beasts lay a strange essence, a glowing core filled with power. Without hesitation, he consumed it. A thought crossed his mind. If he ate this, there was a chance he could obtain the demon beast's power, and that belief was not unfounded. Ever since he had started consuming these essences, adapting to this harsh world had become much easier for him. He realized there was one more thing he had discovered. It seemed that this body originally belonged to someone with the status of a third-class mercenary. As he examined the badge in his hand, a thought crossed his mind. He could understand the writing of this world. If a badge like this existed, then it could only mean one thing. There were people living somewhere in this world. He suddenly noticed a faint glow ahead and realized that he could see light. His expression stiffened for a moment as something caught his attention. In the next instant, his eyes locked onto the ground in front of him. A hidden mechanism lay there, its sharp metal jaws ready to snap shut. It was a trap. Understanding dawned on him immediately, and his gaze sharpened as he realized what that meant. As he moved forward cautiously, a thought crossed his mind. There might be people nearby. In the next moment, a bright light burst through the trees, drawing his attention. He quickly turned toward it, and as his gaze focused, he saw something unexpected. A house. His eyes widened in surprise, and without hesitation, he stepped closer and knocked on the door. Leaning slightly inside, he cautiously called out, asking if anyone was there. As he stepped inside, his gaze fell on a book resting quietly on the table. He paused, slightly confused, staring at it in silence. Curiosity took over, and he reached out, touching the cover. In that moment, a realization formed in his mind. It was a field record of the demon realm. His eyes widened in shock as he opened the book, quickly flipping through the pages. The more he read, the more his expression changed. He suddenly understood that the history of this place and the terms used in this world were all written down in great detail within those pages. He stared at the book with a serious expression, a firm thought forming in his mind. If he wanted to live in this world, then this book was absolutely essential. Just as he took a step, a sudden voice stopped him in his tracks, asking who he was. He immediately raised his hand slightly, trying to calm the situation. He explained that there was no need to misunderstand. He had simply seen a house in the middle of nowhere and, out of curiosity, decided to step inside. That was all. The old man's expression remained cold and unwelcoming. Without hesitation, he told him to leave, making it clear that he wanted nothing to do with him. Hearing this, Wu Jin did not argue. He simply nodded and calmly replied that he understood. He hesitated for a moment, his hand still resting on the book. Then, with a slightly awkward tone, he spoke up, saying that he wanted to read the book and asked if it could be lent to him. He added calmly that if payment was required, he was willing to pay. The old man's eyes narrowed as he questioned what he would do if he refused. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Wu Jin's expression turned serious as a firm thought crossed his mind. He needed that book to survive here. His gaze hardened slightly. In the next instant, he made his decision. If it came down to it, he might even have to become a robber. In the next instant, his hand moved toward his weapon, gripping it firmly as his body tensed. At the same time, the old man raised his crossbow, aiming it straight at him without hesitation. The air between them turned cold and heavy, filled with silent, killing intent. Wu Jin observed him carefully, his gaze steady. He admitted inwardly that he did not know how strong the old man was. However, a faint confidence rose within him as he concluded that he did not think he would lose. The old man stared at him for a moment, then let out a quiet breath. Finally, he spoke calmly, remarking that no real robber would openly say that he wanted to read a book. Then, in a calmer tone, he introduced himself, saying his name was Hector. Seizing the moment, Wu Jin noticed the shift and quickly responded, introducing himself as Kim Wu Jin. Hearing the name, the old man tilted his head slightly and repeated it in confusion, commenting that it was quite a unique name. After a brief pause, Wu Jin simply told him to call him Jin. Inside, he quietly thought that his name must be difficult for people here to pronounce. After a moment of silence, the old man nodded and said he understood what Jin was trying to say. However, he made it clear that the book was precious to him as well, so he could not lend it out. Still, he offered a compromise. If Jin truly wanted to read it, he could stay there for a while and read the book inside. But in return for letting him read the book, he wanted help with some simple chores around the house. Hearing that, Jin immediately agreed and thanked him without hesitation. Not long after, Jin found himself staying at Hector's house. Though Hector spoke bluntly, he did not seem like a bad person. Later, Hector placed a bowl in front of him and told him to eat. Jin looked down at the food, slightly stunned. As he took a bite, a warm feeling spread through him. It had been a long time since he had eaten something like this. The food was delicious, and for a moment he even felt that Hector might be an angel. At daybreak, Hector prepared to head out for a hunt. Jin asked if he was going out again that day, and Hector calmly replied that it might take a while this time. He then revealed that he was going to take revenge on the demon beast that had killed his comrade. Jin watched him quietly, noticing the tension in Hector's expression. If someone as strong as Hector became serious just talking about it, then the enemy must be extremely powerful. As Hector walked out of the house, Jin silently concluded that the demon beast they were dealing with had to be incredibly dangerous. When Jin was alone, he spent his time reading the field record, carefully going through its pages. The stories within the record began with the Northern Empire. It described how the king of the Northern Empire, blinded by greed, laid his hands on the gate of the other world, an artifact said to hold the truth of all things and immense power. But from the moment he did so, everything changed. From that day onward, disaster began, and the powerful demon beasts that emerged from the gate of the otherworld quickly spread across the land, turning the entire northern region into a demon realm within just 9 years. In response, many human factions united and formed the Church Alliance. Together, they erected a massive barrier in an attempt to stop the spread of the demon realm. After reading this, he gently closed the book and fell into thought. He realized that the record contained a great deal of useful information, but something still felt incomplete. As he reflected further, he came to a realization. The deeper one ventured into the demon realm, the stronger the demon beasts became. On the other hand, the closer one moved toward brighter areas, the weaker those creatures seemed to be. Meanwhile, Hector moved swiftly through the forest, his body cutting through the wind as he ran at full speed. At the same time, Jin sat deep in thought, wondering just how far he had wandered into the demon realm. The question lingered in his mind as he tried to understand his situation. He began to question his own strength, unsure of how powerful he truly was in this unfamiliar place. Meanwhile, Hector continued forward without slowing down, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. In the distance, a group of demon beasts suddenly appeared, charging forward with ferocious intent. The ground trembled under their movement as they rushed toward him. In that instant, Hector reacted without hesitation. His feet slammed against the ground as he forcefully changed direction, narrowly avoiding the incoming attack. Dust and debris scattered as he slid across the ground, creating distance in a split second. Without wasting time, Hector drew his bow with precision. His movements were swift and practiced as he released multiple arrows in rapid succession. The arrows shot forward like streaks of light, cutting through the air toward the charging beasts. The beasts continued their assault, leaping forward with ferocity, but Hector remained calm. His attacks forced them to adjust mid-charge, disrupting their momentum. Even so, the pressure was overwhelming. Sweat formed on his face as he gritted his teeth, clearly feeling the intensity of the situation. Frustration slipped out as he muttered in exasperation, realizing that dealing with these relentless creatures would not be easy. So, without wasting any time, Hector rushed toward the house. However, as he was running toward it, he saw Jin step forward into his path, his eyes glowing with a chilling red light as he gripped his weapon. Seeing this, Hector panicked and shouted for Jin to run. His voice was filled with urgency as he warned that this place was far too dangerous. But before he could react further, Jin moved. In a flash, he passed by Hector instantly. Hector's face twisted in shock, while Jin's expression remained calm, his red eyes glowing coldly as the wind rushed past his face. In the next instant, he moved again. With a sharp burst of speed, he launched forward, his body cutting through the air like a blade. The ground below cracked as the force of his movement exploded outward. He soared high into the sky, rising above the battlefield in a single motion. Beneath him, the massive beast looked up, its red eyes burning with fury as it raised its claws to strike. But Jin was already descending. Like a falling blade, he drove straight down. In a single, clean motion, his attack split through the beast's body. The impact was devastating, tearing through flesh and bone as blood sprayed into the air. The creature's body collapsed under the force, unable to withstand the overwhelming power of the strike. In the distance, the remaining beasts froze for a moment, their eyes fixed on the fallen corpse. Low growls rumbled from their throats as they stared at the scene, their instincts warning them of the danger before them. One of the larger beasts stepped forward, baring its sharp fangs as a deep, threatening growl escaped its mouth. Nearby, Hector stood frozen, his eyes wide and his face pale with shock. Sweat trickled down his face as he struggled to process what he had just witnessed. His lips trembled slightly as disbelief filled his expression. In his mind, he could not accept what he was seeing. Jin had taken down a werewolf in a single slash. Jin turned his head slightly, his expression calm and almost indifferent. A faint smile appeared on his face as he glanced at Hector and asked him if a demon beast like that could even be considered strong. Hector looked at Jin with a serious expression, his brows furrowed as he repeated the question in disbelief. He asked if Jin was really asking whether a werewolf was strong. His gaze sharpened as he answered his own question. He stated that a werewolf was strong, extremely strong. Jin listened quietly, his expression calm as he processed the answer. After a brief pause, he simply acknowledged it, understanding the weight behind Hector's words. Then, without showing any concern, Jin spoke in a steady voice. He said that, in that case, he would hear the details later, after he was done dealing with the rest of them. Ahead of him, a pack of werewolves emerged from the forest, their eyes glowing as they bared their fangs. The ground trembled slightly as they began rushing forward, closing the distance with ferocious speed. Jin stood alone, gripping his blade loosely, completely unfazed as the beasts charged straight toward him. Jin narrowed his eyes as he observed the pack in front of him. To him, they didn't look that tough. However, he quickly noted that there were around 40 of them. He understood that such a number was more than enough to get someone killed if they let their guard down. Instead of trying to fight them all head-on, Jin calmly formed a plan. He decided that he needed to take out the one that ranked second after the werewolf and crush their morale. His gaze sharpened as he focused on the target. It was the one with the unusually large build, standing at the very front. Jin identified it without hesitation. In the next instant, a fierce red aura erupted around him as he raised his blade high into the air. With killing intent surging, Jin locked onto his target. In his mind, the decision was already made. That one would be the first to die. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the massive beast as it locked its glowing blue eyes onto Jin. Jin's gaze sharpened in response, his red eyes flickering with cold focus. In that instant, both predator and hunter stared each other down in silence. The large wolf paused, its expression tightening as if sensing something unusual. A strange stillness passed between them, and for a brief moment it hesitated. The smaller wolves behind it looked confused, unable to understand what was happening. Then suddenly, the massive wolf was launched backward with explosive force. The pack froze in shock, their eyes widening in disbelief. A sharp, stunned reaction rippled through them. The massive wolf let out a furious, frantic bark, its voice echoing wildly as panic crept into its tone. All around, the pack froze, their eyes widened, bodies stiffening as an invisible pressure swept through the air. Leaves spiraled upward in a strange current, and for the first time, fear spread among the wolves. In the next moment, the formation broke. The wolves turned and ran. One after another they fled without hesitation, abandoning the battlefield as if escaping something far more terrifying than death itself. Hector stared in disbelief. He could hardly comprehend what he was seeing. The wolves, beasts known for their courage, had actually run away. Jin remained calm, his expression unchanged as he watched them retreat. He quietly noted that, at the very least, they were smart enough to understand the situation. The scene shifted to a quiet wooden house, where the werewolf's massive corpse lay stretched across the table. Hector calmly remarked that it was worth at least 40 gold coins. He explained that this was the bounty placed on the head of the werewolf that had just been killed. Jin looked at the body and asked if that amount was considered a lot of money. Hector nodded without hesitation and confirmed that it was. He added that, with that kind of money, one could easily live comfortably for 6 or 7 years without worry. Hearing this, Jin's expression shifted slightly, a hint of surprise flashing across his face. He then looked back at the corpse and questioned how a weak creature like that could have such a high bounty. After a brief pause, his thoughts deepened. He realized that the real issue was something else entirely. If even trash like that werewolf carried such a large reward, then whenever he was short on money, all he needed to do was find and hunt similar creatures. With that, he could continue earning insane amounts of money without stopping. For the first time, he felt that life here might actually be easier than the past 12 years he had endured. Back inside the house, the werewolf's body was laid out as Hector began examining the spoils. Along with the werewolf hide, he also gave Jin jerky, a pouch filled with silver coins, and a map labeled as a pioneer map. Jin looked at everything in front of him, slightly surprised as he tried to process why Hector was giving this to him. However, Hector calmly handed over the items and instructed him to take them to the pioneer village. He told him that the location was already marked on the map and that he should look for someone named Jacob there. He assured him that Jacob would pay the proper price for the hide. Hearing that, Jin hesitated for a moment and asked if it was really alright for him to receive something so valuable so easily. Hector looked at him calmly and explained that the werewolf had been killed on his behalf, so this was nothing more than repayment. He reminded him that he had mentioned it before. He also held a grudge against that werewolf. With a steady gaze, Hector expressed his gratitude, thanking him sincerely for avenging him. He then extended his hand and said that he hoped they would meet again someday if fate allowed it. Jin accepted the gesture, shaking his hand firmly. With a composed expression, he thanked the old man for everything. After their farewell, Jin stepped out of the wooden house, carrying the heavy werewolf hide and supplies on his back. Without looking back, he quietly left, while the old man remained standing at the doorway, watching him go. Soon, Jin walked deeper into the forest, following a narrow path beneath towering trees. The surroundings grew calm and quiet, with only the faint rustling of leaves echoing around him as he moved forward alone. As he continued on his journey, a subtle sound suddenly broke the silence. In the distance, atop a large rock, a werewolf stood still, its long tail raised high. It let out a low, ominous growl, its gaze fixed forward at Jin. Some days later, Jin finally arrived at the gates of Pioneer Village, carrying the werewolf hide and supplies on his back. As he looked ahead at the settlement, he realized that this was the pioneer village he had been told about. He observed the surroundings carefully and noted that for a small village it was surprisingly well organized and properly built. As he stepped inside, the guards at the entrance stopped him briefly, but he passed through without issue. However, the moment he entered, he could feel the atmosphere shift. People around the village began glancing at him, their eyes filled with caution and curiosity. He quietly wondered if it was because he was a stranger they had never seen before. However, he knew that it made sense. In a world like this, people could be even more dangerous than demon beasts. Following that thought, he entered a tavern. Inside, the atmosphere was lively. People sat around tables, drinking, eating, and chatting, while others played games. Despite the noise, a few glances still fell on him as he walked in. He moved forward calmly, ignoring the attention, and approached the counter. Gently, he placed the bundle and the hide on the table in front of the owner. The man behind the counter looked at him and casually asked if he wanted a mug of beer. However, Jin calmly refused the offer of alcohol and said that he would pass on the drink. Then, more seriously, he asked if they knew where he could find someone named Jacob. Hearing this, one of the men reacted with slight curiosity. A man stepped forward and introduced himself as Jacob, asking what he needed. Jin observed him quietly and thought to himself that this was Jacob, but he looked like the type who would rip people off. Without showing his thoughts, he explained that he had been sent by Elder Hector. He added that Hector had told him that if he met Jacob, he would be able to sell a werewolf hide. The moment Jacob heard that, his expression changed drastically. Shock filled his face as he shouted in disbelief, asking if it was a werewolf. He then questioned whether Hector had really taken down a werewolf. Seeing his reaction, Jin realized that Jacob believed Hector was the one who had killed the werewolf. After thinking for a moment, he decided there was no need to correct him. As Jacob examined the hide more closely, his expression suddenly froze. His eyes widened in shock as he stared at it. Unable to believe what he was seeing, he muttered in disbelief, questioning whether it was truly a werewolf hide. The people nearby also reacted with surprise. They began to murmur among themselves, wondering if the old man Hector had really managed to do it in the end. Some of them spoke with admiration, saying that even though Hector was old, he was still Hector. Jacob's lips slowly curled into a grin. With a confident laugh, he agreed, saying that of course Hector would pull it off. Then, with a satisfied expression, he declared that he had always known Hector would succeed. But suddenly, the atmosphere turned tense as several men surrounded Jin, their intentions clear. One of them stepped forward, gripping a knife, while the others closed in from behind. However, Jin remained calm, his eyes sharp as he questioned what they thought they were doing. Jacob smirked coldly and replied that it should be obvious. He warned him to walk away while he was still being nice, adding that if he did, they might spare his life. Hearing this, Jin immediately understood the situation. In his mind, he thought that he was right. The man Hector recommended was truly a scammer. He then spoke calmly, pointing out that Hector had trusted this man enough to send him here, yet from the very beginning, the man had already planned this betrayal. Hearing this, Jacob's expression darkened slightly before he responded in a mocking tone. He told him to watch his words, claiming that all he had done was make an investment. With a cold smile, he explained his reasoning. Hector had gone too far away, and continuing to send him supplies only resulted in losses, so he would take the hide to make up for all the losses he had taken. Hearing this, Jin's gaze turned cold, a dangerous red glint flashing in his eyes as a thought crossed his mind. Should he kill him? For a brief moment, killing intent surged within him, but he quickly suppressed it. Even though the situation felt disgusting, he told himself that he could not kill someone over just a piece of hide. As he hesitated, one of the other men suddenly lashed out, throwing his drink straight at Jin's face. The liquid splashed across him as the man cursed, telling him he should be grateful that he was a nice guy. Then, with a mocking grin, Jacob added that the kid should stop overthinking things and just get lost. Jin remained silent, saying nothing as droplets of liquid slid down his face and cloak. Without a word, he turned his back and began walking away. Behind him, the sound of a mug hitting the ground echoed as it bounced and rolled across the floor. The surrounding men watched closely, their weapons ready, forming a loose circle as he passed through them without hesitation. Seeing this, Jacob, wearing the werewolf hide, smirked in satisfaction and praised it as a smart choice. But in the very next moment, his expression shifted slightly, confusion flickering across his face as something unexpected happened. As Jin walked away, he suddenly stopped and blocked the door, so no one could get out without his permission. Then he slightly turned his head. In a calm voice, he called out to Jacob. The werewolf-clad man paused, confused by the unexpected call. Jin's eyes turned cold as he spoke again, pointing out that if someone planned to cheat from the very beginning, then they should have aimed for the neck instead of striking the back of the head. Hearing this, Jacob let out a strained sound, momentarily stunned. Then his expression twisted as he mocked Jin, taking back his earlier praise and stating that he was not as smart as he thought. One of the men rushed forward with killing intent, shouting that a brat like him did not even know the value of his own life. The attacker swung his blade down with full force, confident that the strike would end everything in an instant. In that moment, Jin remained calm, standing still as if the incoming attack meant nothing to him. Jin's gaze turned colder, and deep inside a thought surfaced. Against scum like this, he would not feel any guilt, even if he killed them. The blade came crashing down, but Jin moved at the last second, evading the strike with precise timing. The attacker immediately followed up, gripping his weapon tightly and swinging again with all his strength. But as the weapon met resistance, his eyes widened in shock. He muttered in disbelief, realizing that the strike felt unnaturally heavy. At that moment, Jin's red eyes gleamed, his expression calm yet deadly, as he prepared to finish the fight. In an instant, Jin moved through the chaos, his body weaving between attacks as blades sliced through the air behind him. Blood splattered across the floor as one of the men collapsed, unable to keep up with his speed. Another attacker roared and raised his weapon high, bringing it down with all his strength. But before the strike could land, Jin had already slipped past him. The heavy blow crashed into the ground instead, shattering the floor with a loud impact as debris scattered everywhere. Without hesitation, Jin grabbed a nearby table and swung it with force, using it as a weapon. The wooden structure slammed into one of the attackers, sending him stumbling back. The man gritted his teeth in rage, shouting angrily as he tried to retaliate, but Jin's movements remained precise and overwhelming. In that moment, the entire battlefield shifted, as the attackers began to realize they were no longer in control of the fight. In an instant, Jin's blade cut cleanly through the attacker, leaving a sharp streak as blood splashed across the ground. His eyes glowed with a cold red light, calm and unwavering even in the middle of chaos. Seeing this, Jacob froze in place, his face drenched in sweat as fear took over. He stared in disbelief and wondered where such a monster had come from. In his mind, there was no way someone this strong could exist nearby without him knowing. As the fight continued around them, Jacob's thoughts raced. No matter what the truth was, he realized one thing clearly: if this continued, he would die for nothing. At that moment, another attacker charged forward, slashing wildly with both hands, trying to overwhelm Jin from above. But Jin remained steady. Even surrounded, his posture did not falter. In an instant, he moved his sword and cut through the attacker's body. At the same time, another man rushed in from the side, throwing a powerful punch toward Jin. But before either attack could land properly, Jin moved. With a sudden shift, he slipped past the incoming strike and drove his fist straight into the attacker's torso. The impact landed clean and heavy, forcing the man's body to fold as the air was knocked out of him. In the next instant, Jin followed through without hesitation. His movement flowed seamlessly into another strike, smashing the man's body backward with overwhelming force. The sound of the impact echoed as the attacker was sent crashing away. The man's body slammed hard against the ground, blood trailing behind him as his strength gave out completely. Jin stood still, his face half covered in shadow, while his glowing red eye stared forward coldly. Blood streaked across his cheek, yet his expression remained calm, almost indifferent. At that moment, Jacob broke. His face twisted in fear as he shouted in panic, asking what the hell was going on. His voice trembled as he cursed under his breath, then screamed for everyone to run. Without hesitation, the group turned and fled. Their footsteps echoed loudly as they rushed toward the exit. They jumped out of the window to escape. One man was violently thrown forward, crashing through debris as pieces of wood and glass scattered around him. His body slammed hard onto the ground, rolling helplessly as the impact knocked the breath out of him. He struggled to lift himself. In the next moment, his expression twisted in horror as he realized the truth. He shouted that it was a red wolf. The beast stood before them, its glowing eyes filled with killing intent, its sharp fangs exposed as a low growl rumbled from its throat. Fear spread instantly among the men as one of them questioned how a demon beast like that could appear in the village. Before anyone could react, Jin also jumped out of the window and appeared behind them, his blade already drawn. Jacob froze, his hands raised instinctively in fear, unable to even comprehend how the distance had been closed so quickly. The others stumbled backward in panic, their bodies trembling as they tried to escape. But the presence of both Jin and the monstrous wolf crushed their will completely. The red wolf lowered its body, ready to pounce, while the men stood helplessly in front of it, their faces filled with despair. Seeing the wolf, Jin remembered that it was the same one that had attacked him before. The beast froze for an instant, its expression shifting as if it understood. A heavy silence followed. Jin's lips curled faintly as he spoke again, his voice cold and indifferent. He asked if the creature had come here because it wanted to die as well. At those words, the wolf's expression changed drastically. Its eyes widened, rage and shock surging through it as its body tensed. In the next moment, the beast growled deeply, its muscles tightening before it suddenly moved. With a sharp burst of motion, the red wolf leaped forward, its claws digging into the ground as it launched itself toward him. It rolled across the ground, letting out rough breaths and making soft sounds. Jin stood calmly in front of it, watching without moving, his expression unreadable. Nearby, the men stared in confusion, their faces filled with shock. None of them could understand what had just happened. Jin glanced at the beast and quietly wondered what was wrong with it, noting how strangely it was behaving, almost like a frightened mutt rather than a fierce demon beast. Seeing this, Jin pointed at those three men and commanded the wolf to bite them. For a brief moment, the red wolf stiffened, its body reacting instinctively. Its eyes glowed as its limbs moved on their own, as if driven by an unseen force. In the next instant, the beast leaped forward with explosive speed, its jaws wide open as it lunged straight toward one of the men. The man's eyes widened in terror as the massive creature descended on him, its fangs aimed directly at his body, leaving him no time to react. The wolf's jaws snapped shut with brutal force, clamping down on the man as his scream tore through the air. Pain exploded across his body as he cried out in agony. In the next instant, blood burst outward, splattering across the scene as the beast tore into him without hesitation, its attack merciless and decisive. Everything fell silent for a brief moment. Jin watched calmly, his expression unchanged. A faint sound escaped his lips as he observed the result. He simply remarked that it was not bad. Jacob stood frozen as the beast brutally tore through and through his men's bodies. A cold wave of panic washed over him. His face turned pale, sweat dripping down as fear tightened his chest. His mind raced as he wondered what he should do. Realizing the danger, he quickly decided that he had to escape this situation first. Not far away, Jin watched the scene unfold with a calm and indifferent gaze. Seeing Jin, Jacob looked at him and thought that someone like him would calm down after just a few apologies. Overwhelmed by fear, he dropped to his knees without hesitation. He slammed his forehead against the ground repeatedly, raising both hands in surrender as he begged for his life. His voice trembled as he pleaded, promising that he would do anything Jin told him to do as long as he was spared. He knew that he would think about revenge later, but right now, he only needed a way to survive. But in the next instant, a blade slammed down violently beside him, piercing into the ground with a sharp impact. The sudden strike made his eyes widen in shock, his body trembling as he realized just how close he was to death. He slowly lifted his head, his vision shaking, only to see Jin standing right in front of him. Jin stood calmly, one hand resting over the hilt of his weapon, his posture relaxed as if none of this mattered to him. His gaze remained cold and unreadable, watching the man without a hint of mercy. Jacob's voice trembled as he called out weakly, addressing him with fear and uncertainty. Jin narrowed his eyes slightly, his expression turning colder. In his mind, he scoffed at the man, thinking that this kind of punk really believed he was an easy target. He remembered that in his past life, when he was working at a company, things had not been going well. His boss had asked him to just let it slide this once. He already knew how things were at the company. Those same words had been used before, excuses repeated over and over. The factory manager had told him the same thing when his paycheck didn't come in. Back then, Jin had let it get to him. He had chosen to stay quiet and accept it. With a forced smile, he told himself that he understood. At that time, he believed he had no other choice. But now, looking back, he realized that he never should have done that. Once he accepted it, things only got worse. What started as a paycheck delayed by just a week slowly turned into 1 month, then 2. The delays kept piling up, and the excuses never stopped. And then, at some point, when Jin gathered his courage and spoke up, telling his boss that he still hadn't received that month's pay, before he could say anything more, the man's expression turned cold. The man sneered as he looked down at Jin with contempt. He let out a mocking laugh, calling him a worthless little punk. His expression quickly turned harsh as he raised his voice, preaching that hard times were meant to be endured together. He shouted that people like Jin were selfish, complaining about things they should simply tolerate. In his eyes, Jin was nothing more than a troublesome brat. He was labeled selfish, treated like someone insignificant, someone who could be pushed around without consequence. Living paycheck to paycheck had already pushed him to his limits. The constant delays, the uncertainty, the pressure, it all slowly drove him to the edge. Back in the present, Jin stood calmly with his sword planted firmly into the ground. His head was slightly lowered, his expression unreadable, as the man in front of him stared in shock. There was no anger on Jin's face, only a cold, quiet resolve. Despite everything that had happened back then, Jin had learned one thing from that time. And this time, he would not make the same mistake again. As Jin turned his back, the man's face twisted into a sinister grin, his eyes wide and unhinged as a low, eerie chuckle escaped his lips. Without saying a word, he stared ahead, his expression filled with madness. In the next instant, he moved. With sudden speed, he rushed forward from behind, gripping a dagger tightly in his hand as he aimed straight for Jin's back. Then, with a furious shout, he swung the blade down, yelling for Jin to just die already. But Jin intercepted it effortlessly, his blade meeting the strike and stopping it cold. Jin's voice was calm, yet filled with cold intent. He stated that people like him, those who rip others off, didn't even understand the meaning of reflection. The man's face twisted with rage as he shouted back, cursing Jin with all the fury he had left. But it was already too late. In the next instant, Jin moved again, his figure blurred as his blade swept across with deadly precision. A sharp arc cut through the air, followed by a burst of blood. The man's body jerked violently as the strike landed, his expression frozen in shock as the attack carved through him in a single decisive motion. The man's head spun through the air, blood spraying violently as his body collapsed beneath it. Jin stood still, his cloak fluttering slightly, his red eyes glowing coldly as he looked down at what remained. In this place, he made a silent resolve. He would never allow himself to be used like that ever again. The lifeless body fell heavily to the ground at his feet, dust rising with the impact. After a brief pause, Jin spoke calmly, saying that it was all right. He then turned his gaze forward, his eyes settling on the next target. A beast stood not far away, its body tense and alert. Jin looked at it without hesitation and stated that the next one was that mutt over there. It seemed to him that the beast had decided to follow him, at least for now. The creature lowered its head and dropped a small pouch onto the ground. As it landed, the bag opened slightly, revealing several gold coins shining inside. Jin looked at it and let out a quiet hum, his expression turning thoughtful as he observed the offering. After a moment, he spoke calmly, asking the beast if it wanted to come with him. The beast reacted instantly, its eyes widening in surprise. Jin then reached out and gently placed his hand on its head. A faint smile appeared on his face as he stroked the beast's head, his gaze softening slightly. He quietly remarked that it was a clever little thing. After a moment, he spoke again, saying that from now on they should get along, calling it a mutt in a casual tone. Time passed. The scene shifted to him waking up in a quiet room, sitting up on the bed as he rubbed his head. The beast lay nearby on the floor, resting peacefully. A calm expression formed on his face as he realized that he had just experienced a perfectly sound sleep. He then reflected silently, feeling so light that it seemed as if he could fly that morning. A moment later, he came outside to wash his clothes. After the fight with those people, his clothes had become completely dirty. He casually went about washing and cleaning himself. A heavy realization surfaced in his mind. It was the first time he had killed people, not just one or two, but many, and yet, despite everything, his expression remained calm. He wondered if it was because those people had been nothing more than trash, but almost immediately, he dismissed that idea. What he had felt back then was not hatred or justification, it was something else. It was the same thrill he experienced when hunting demon beasts. His hand pressed lightly against his chest as he tried to understand it. That feeling, it was undeniable. It was proof that something inside him had already begun to change. A faint thought crossed his mind as his eyes shifted, a quiet unease lingering within him. Perhaps he had been cursed, or something similar, but in the end he let out a silent breath and accepted it. As long as he was still alive, that alone was enough. He looked ahead as a quiet determination settled in his mind. He understood that life here would be completely different from the one he had lived before. There would be no more being crushed by unfairness. This time, he would live comfortably. With that thought, he chose to focus only on the present and simply enjoy what lay ahead. Soon he arrived at the 5th pioneer city, the massive walls standing tall before him. As he approached, he calmly decided that the first thing he would do was sell the hide he had obtained. Turning slightly, he told the beast to stay nearby in a place where people would not notice it. According to the field record, if he wanted to receive a demon beast bounty, there was only one place he needed to go, the Church Alliance. He looked around the city and recalled that this was a pioneer city. According to what he knew, the Church Alliance should be located here. As he adjusted his belongings, a thought crossed his mind. It felt a bit strange to keep calling the beast Mutt. Soon he arrived at a tall building that appeared to be the Church Alliance. Inside, a man lazily stretched in his seat. He stepped forward and asked if this was the Church Alliance. The man confirmed that it was and asked how he could help. Before anything else could be said, the heavy bundle he was carrying suddenly dropped onto the counter with a loud thud, startling the man. Without hesitation, he stated that he was there to collect a demon beast bounty. The man frowned as he examined the hide and said that it was just dog hide, warning that this was not a place to joke around. But as he looked closer, his expression suddenly changed. His eyes widened in shock as he paused and told him to wait a second. In the next moment, he realized the truth and shouted that it was werewolf hide. Stunned, he looked at him with disbelief and nervously asked if he had defeated it himself. Jin remained calm and simply confirmed that it was true. After confirming that Jin was the one who had hunted it, the man asked him to wait for a moment. After some time, the staff member returned and apologized for keeping him waiting. He explained that because the amount involved was large, they had taken extra time to verify that the hide was genuine. He then confirmed that it had indeed turned out to be real werewolf hide and placed a bag of coins in front of him, telling him that this was his reward and asking him to check it. Jin picked up the bag and looked at it thoughtfully, realizing that this amount of money was enough for him to live comfortably for 6 or 7 years. As he opened the bag and saw the gold coins inside, a subtle change appeared in his expression. He felt something unfamiliar, something different from the feeling he experienced while hunting. A faint smile formed on his lips as he understood it clearly. Money truly was a good thing. As Jin examined the coins, a hesitant voice called out, asking for his attention. He lifted his gaze slightly, his expression turning curious. The staff member, looking somewhat nervous, asked if he would be interested in taking on another job. He explained that there was something he wanted to request from him. Jin's lips curved into a faint, intrigued smile as he asked what kind of job he was talking about. The staff member then explained the situation. Recently, a demon beast had appeared at a nearby quarry and it had been causing serious trouble. Because of the beast, the workers were unable to enter the quarry at all. Since they could no longer mine bloodstone, money had stopped circulating in the city. The situation had grown so severe that the entire city was now on the verge of collapse, and the demon beast causing all this chaos was said to be even stronger than a werewolf. Despite the danger, he looked at Jin with confidence and admitted that he had a feeling Jin could handle it. Hearing this, Jin asked calmly what kind of demon beast it was. The man then revealed its name, Mad Skull, and described it with a serious expression. He added that there was a bounty of 70 gold coins placed on it. At that moment, Jin's expression shifted slightly as recognition flashed through his eyes. He recalled reading about Mad Skull in a field record, realizing that this was no ordinary beast. He recalled his past encounter when he had fought one before. The creature, known for its hard skull, possessed terrifying durability and overwhelming aggression. It was a demon beast far more brutal than a werewolf, with strength and toughness on an entirely different level. Understanding this, he acknowledged that it was no surprise the creature had been causing so much trouble. He remembered his first battle against it. Back then, defeating it had taken an entire month. Throughout that grueling process, he had faced death again and again, nearly 28 times, before finally overcoming it. The man looked at Jin seriously and asked if he would be able to hunt the demon beast. Jin remained silent for a moment, his expression calm and unreadable as he thought about it. Then a faint smile appeared on his face. His eyes glowed with confidence as he answered without hesitation, saying that of course he could. At that moment, his decision was already made. In his mind, the target had been chosen. His next prey was decided. Sometime later, Jin reached the quarry. The area appeared abandoned, with tools and carts left behind. As he observed the place, he realized that the workers had not been able to continue their work for quite some time, all because of Mad Skull. As he stepped deeper into the mine, a heavy, gloomy energy filled the surroundings. The air felt cold and oppressive, sending a chill down his spine. It was clearly not a place meant to linger in. Understanding the danger, he decided that whatever he came here to do, he must finish it as quickly as possible. As he moved further inside, suddenly someone called him from behind, asking him to wait. Jin turned slightly, confused, only to see a group of men approaching him. One of them stepped forward, raising his hands as if to stop him. The man spoke firmly, asking him to respect the order. He explained that they had arrived first and were already preparing to fight. Jin turned his head slightly, his gaze calm yet sharp as he looked at them, clearly unimpressed. In his view, there was no such thing as taking turns when it came to killing demon beasts. Hearing his response, the red-haired man could only let out an awkward sound, unsure how to react. After a brief moment, the red-haired man changed his approach. With a more relaxed tone, he suggested that instead of arguing, Jin could join their party and hunt together with them. Jin remained silent for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as he understood their intention. They were trying to recruit him. He thought it through calmly. If he waited for his turn and that mercenary group succeeded first, it would only waste his time. However, starting a fight with them just to decide who would go first would be pointless. After weighing the situation, he came to a conclusion. Even if he had to split the reward, it might be more efficient this way. At the same time, one of the mercenaries whispered nervously to their leader, warning that if they kept splitting the reward further, there might be nothing left for them. But the red-haired man remained confident, clearly believing that working together with this stranger would be the better choice. In the end, Jin acknowledged the situation. It seemed that cooperating with this mercenary band might not be a bad option after all. However, there was still a problem. He couldn't simply trust people in a place like this so easily. Then, in a calm but questioning tone, he pointed out that they already had plenty of people. There was no real reason to bring him along as well. The red-haired man scratched the back of his head, letting out an awkward laugh. He admitted that it was a bit embarrassing to explain, but he made his stance clear. To him, safety mattered more than results, and having Jin join them would make things much easier. With a confident smile, he added that Jin seemed strong. Hearing that, Jin's eyes narrowed slightly. He could see through it. Just moments ago they had been trying to assert dominance, but now they were suddenly polite. It was the typical behavior of people who only respected strength. Turning his head slightly, he questioned them calmly, asking what made them so sure that he was strong. The red-haired man answered calmly, explaining that if Jin weren't strong, there was no way a wolf would be following him like that. Hearing this, Jin was momentarily surprised and quickly turned his gaze. Not far away, the wolf Jin had asked to hide was indeed there, staying close. Nearby, a blonde woman gently held the creature's face, speaking with admiration. From what she knew, wolf-type demon beasts were extremely independent. Even the Church Alliance had never been able to tame them. Seeing one follow a person so obediently was truly astonishing. Jin's expression stiffened slightly as realization struck him. He remembered clearly telling that mutt to stay hidden, yet somehow it had come out on its own. As he watched, the woman calmly fed the wolf, and the creature eagerly devoured a piece of meat, completely focused on the food. Understanding the situation, Jin let out a quiet realization. The wolf had come out simply for the meat. Just then, the beast saw Jin's expression and dropped the piece of meat from its mouth onto the ground, then slid it toward Jin. The sudden movement startled both Jin and the red-haired mercenary. Watching the scene unfold, Jin's expression darkened slightly. A thought crossed his mind as irritation flickered in his eyes. He wondered what that mutt even thought of him. However, seeing the juicy piece of meat, Jin's eyes flickered and his mouth started watering. Jin stared down at the piece of meat, his eyes widening slightly as a strange thought surfaced in his mind. He couldn't understand why his body was reacting this way. As he hesitated, another thought followed. It had been a long time since he had eaten proper meat. Still, doubt lingered. That was the same meat the wolf had been eating, and it had even fallen onto the ground. His gaze hardened for a moment as he struggled internally, his sense of dignity clashing with his hunger. The thought of his own pride crossed his mind, yet before he could pull back, his hand moved on its own. Almost unconsciously, he reached down and picked up the meat. At that moment, the blonde woman smiled gently and spoke in a soft tone, offering him food if he was hungry. Jin froze slightly, caught off guard by her kindness, his expression turning blank as he struggled to respond. A faint sound escaped his lips as he looked at her, his expression softening. For the first time, a thought surfaced clearly in his mind. She was someone he could actually trust. Moments later, they walked together through a cave-like passage, lit by hanging lights as several people moved ahead of them, pushing carts filled with supplies. As he took a bite of the meat, his eyes widened slightly. The taste stunned him. It was rich and juicy, bursting with flavor, carrying a spicy kick similar to Sichuan cuisine. He slowly processed the sensation, realizing that this was on an entirely different level compared to the demon beast meat he had eaten before just to survive. Noticing the situation, the woman turned back with a gentle smile and mentioned that they hadn't introduced themselves yet. The red-haired man turned back with a confident grin and introduced himself as Jonathan, the leader of the Black Marlin mercenary group. Beside him, the blonde woman smiled gently and introduced herself as Claire. Jin hesitated for a brief moment before speaking, almost revealing his original name, but quickly corrected himself and introduced himself as Jin. Jonathan acknowledged it with ease and said he was looking forward to working with him. He added that if Jin had any questions he could ask any time. Jin calmly responded that he understood. After walking a bit further, Jonathan suddenly stopped, his expression sharpening as he noticed something ahead. Then he announced that they had arrived. He explained that this was the place where they would be fighting the Mad Skull. Jonathan immediately began giving orders. He instructed the trap team to set up the nets, while the spear throw team was told to move to their assigned positions. The mercenaries responded loudly, confirming his command. Jonathan glanced back at Claire and casually asked if they should start as well. Claire nodded without hesitation and said she understood. Jin stood quietly, watching them, when something suddenly caught his attention. His expression shifted as he sensed a strange energy forming in the air. He stared ahead in silence, unable to look away. As glowing feathers drifted around, Claire began to float gently, a radiant green light surrounding her. A thick book opened before her, shining as magic spread outward in waves. Seeing this, Jin realized in shock that it was magic. He understood then that this must be the magic mentioned in the field records. Claire's expression turned calm and serene as she continued the ritual. With a soft voice she spoke, invoking her power in her own name and gently calling for a blessing upon the land. A faint green aura wrapped around them as feathers drifted through the air, and Jonathan activated his technique, Feather Step. His movements became light and swift, almost as if he were gliding rather than walking. With a confident grin, he remarked that he had already said Claire's buffs were amazing. As he stepped forward, the energy around his feet swirled, his speed increasing dramatically. From behind, he calculated calmly that in the best case it would take 3 minutes, and in the worst case 5. Jonathan continued forward without hesitation, stating that he would lure Mad Skull to that spot. In the next instant, he dashed ahead at incredible speed, his body cutting through the air like a feather carried by the wind. Raising his voice, he ordered everyone to be fully ready as he charged straight toward the target. Jin observed Jonathan closely and noted that he had looked clumsy before, but now he had become much faster. Watching the flowing energy and drifting feathers, he found himself impressed, thinking that magic was actually pretty cool. As Claire remained calm beside him, a thought crossed his mind. He wondered if it might be possible for him to learn such magic as well. However, his thoughts were suddenly interrupted as one of Jonathan's men shouted sharply, snapping everyone back to focus. He warned that this was not the time to be spacing out and that Mad Skull would arrive at any moment. His voice turned serious as he reminded them that if even one person made a mistake, they could all die. He urged everyone to stay sharp. Jin steadied himself and quickly reviewed the plan in his mind. The goal was to drive the demon beast into the trap and then unleash everything they had against it. Although it was not a bad strategy, after thinking it through, he wondered if their plan would truly work against Mad Skull. Before he could think further, Jonathan had already moved. His body shot forward like a blur, wrapped in swirling green energy, charging straight toward the approaching beast. With a fierce shout, he called out to the trap team, signaling them to get ready. In the next instant, the massive creature appeared, Mad Skull lunged forward with terrifying force, its roar shaking the surroundings as it chased after Jonathan. The hunters tightened their grips on their weapons, panic and tension spreading among them. Voices rose in alarm as they shouted that it had arrived. The moment had come. Mad Skull was here. The massive beast charged forward, only to be suddenly trapped as a heavy net dropped over its body, tightening around it. Mad Skull roared violently, thrashing as it struggled to break free. From above, Jonathan commanded everyone to pull. The hunters tightened their grip and yanked the ropes with all their strength, forcing the net to constrict further around the raging creature. Despite being restrained, Mad Skull continued to struggle, its powerful body shaking the net as it resisted. Seeing that the moment had come, Jonathan commanded all his men to attack. At once the hunters stepped forward, raising their weapons. With determined expressions, they thrust their spears toward the trapped beast, launching a coordinated attack as the battle reached its critical point. Mad Skull roared in fury, its jaws opening wide as it bared its sharp teeth, struggling violently against the restraints. Its powerful body thrashed, trying to break free from the tightening net. The hunters gritted their teeth and held on, pulling the ropes with all their strength, refusing to let it escape. Some tightened the bindings while others continued to press their attack, surrounding the beast from all sides. Despite being restrained, the creature's sheer strength shook the entire area. Its furious roar echoed through the battlefield as the men struggled to maintain control, pushing themselves to their limits to keep the monster contained. Jonathan's expression suddenly changed as he realized something was wrong. He immediately shouted in alarm. The situation was slipping out of control. The massive beast continued to struggle violently, its strength overwhelming the ropes as several hunters were lifted off the ground and thrown aside. The bindings trembled under the pressure, and it became clear that the creature was overpowering their pull. The hunters gritted their teeth, desperately trying to hold their ground. Some were dragged forward while others lost their footing completely. One of them shouted in frustration, ordering everyone to hold steady, but the chaos only grew worse. Despite their numbers, they still couldn't keep the beast restrained. The sheer power of Mad Skull was far beyond what they had expected. The monster let out a deafening roar as its body strained against the net. Its glowing red eye burned with fury, and with each violent movement, the restraints began to weaken further. The hunters struggled with everything they had, but the balance of the fight was already shifting in the beast's favor. The massive beast suddenly broke free with explosive force, its body surging forward as the ground trembled beneath it. Several hunters were thrown aside like ragdolls, their grips completely shattered as the creature charged ahead. In the distance, Claire's eyes widened in shock. Fear filled her face as she realized Mad Skull was coming toward her. Without hesitation, she raised her hand, gathering energy as a faint glow formed around her palm. Her cloak fluttered as she stepped forward, trying to react in time. But before she could act, Jin moved in front of her. In a single terrifying motion, Jin lunged forward and seized Mad Skull's jaws with his bare hands, stopping it right before Claire. Claire froze in place, her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the horrifying scene unfolding right in front of her. The ground cracked under Jin's feet as he stepped forward, the force of his movement sending sharp shockwaves across the floor. Dust and debris scattered as he braced himself, gripping tightly against the massive tusk that swung toward him. His face tightened with effort as he pushed back, refusing to be overwhelmed. The beast leaned in closer, its glowing red eyes locked onto him, its breath heavy and violent as it pressed forward with terrifying strength. Behind him, Claire reached out in panic, her voice filled with urgency as she warned that Jin was in danger. But Jin did not turn. His expression remained calm, almost indifferent, as he quietly told her not to worry. The beast loomed right in front of him, its presence overwhelming, its killing intent suffocating the air around them. Yet Jin's lips slowly curled into a confident smile. He had already figured it out. He knew exactly how to hunt the Mad Skull. Mad Skull charged forward like a raging storm, its massive horns tearing through the air as it aimed straight for its prey. Jin did not move back. At the last second, he stepped in and grabbed both of Mad Skull's horns, stopping the monstrous charge head-on. The ground beneath his feet cracked under the pressure. Mad Skull roared, its glowing red eyes filled with fury as it tried to push forward and crush him. But Jin stood firm, his cloak whipped violently in the air as he held his ground, his arms steady against the beast's overwhelming strength. Then, in one swift motion, he twisted his body and released one hand, slipping to the side just as Mad Skull's horns tore past him. Without wasting a moment, Jin countered. His blade flashed like lightning. The strike cut cleanly through the air and slammed into Mad Skull's head with explosive force. A shockwave burst out from the impact, shaking the beast's massive frame. Mad Skull roared even louder, its jaws opening wide as it lunged again, refusing to go down. But Jin's eyes remained cold and focused. He planted his feet firmly, his cloak settling behind him, and raised his weapon once more, ready to face Mad Skull's next attack without fear. Although he had believed he had grown much stronger, facing Mad Skull made that confidence waver. He realized that the beast's strength was far beyond what he had expected. Mad Skull roared fiercely, its glowing red eyes burning with madness as its massive jaws opened wide. The pressure it emitted was overwhelming. Jin's eyes sharpened as he quickly raised his guard, narrowly reacting in time. He understood that he had almost made a fatal mistake. If he had let his guard down any longer, the outcome could have been disastrous. Then suddenly a soft breeze brushed past him, carrying with it faint, glowing feathers that drifted through the air. Jin's expression shifted slightly, confusion flickering across his face as he sensed an unfamiliar presence. Before he could react, Mad Skull lunged forward again, its enormous body crashing down with unstoppable force. At that exact moment, Claire rushed in from behind, casting a buff on him and telling him that she would help him. As the glowing feathers swirled around him, Jin felt a sudden change in his body. The heaviness that had been weighing him down disappeared, replaced by an unexpected lightness. It felt as if a massive burden had been lifted, like he had just taken off a 30-kilogram backpack. He quickly realized that with this power, he could finally take Mad Skull down more easily. But just as he prepared to move, voices called out from behind him. A group of fighters rushed forward, shouting that they would help Jin. They believed that if there was a method to defeat the beast, then they could fight together. Jin's expression changed instantly. Without hesitation, he turned back and shouted at them to stop. He told them not to come any closer. The group froze mid-step, their faces filled with confusion and tension, unable to understand why Jin was pushing them away at such a critical moment. Jin moved forward, his cloak flowing with the current of energy. For now, he made his decision. He felt more comfortable fighting on his own. With a sharp burst of speed, he dashed ahead, closing the distance between himself and Mad Skull. The beast's massive frame turned toward him, its red eyes locking onto its target as it prepared to charge again. Jin's gaze remained steady. He knew there were only a few things that truly mattered in this fight. To hunt Mad Skull, it was not about brute force alone. It was about understanding its nature. If he kept those key points in mind, then at the end of the day, no matter how terrifying it looked, Mad Skull was still just a pig. And a pig could be hunted. Jin moved swiftly through the air, his body light and responsive under the effect of the buff. As he observed Mad Skull below, he began analyzing its movements with calm precision. He noted that the beast's straight-line charge was incredibly fast, almost impossible to outrun head-on. Mad Skull roared and slammed into the ground with tremendous force, tearing through the terrain as rocks and debris scattered in every direction. Its massive body skidded forward, struggling to regain control after the impact. That was the weakness. While Mad Skull's charge was powerful, it was terrible at changing direction once it committed to an attack. The moment it rushed forward, it became vulnerable. Jin understood the strategy instantly. The first step was simple: use that flaw to pin its legs down. As he descended, the energy swirling around him intensified, feathers drifting through the air as his movements became even sharper. For a brief moment, Jin wondered if this overwhelming agility was truly the power of the buff. Jin moved like a blur, his body flowing effortlessly through the air as the buff enhanced every step. Watching Mad Skull struggle to keep up, he realized that the beast could no longer match his speed. It was time for the second step. Jin focused on Mad Skull's massive tusks, long curved blades that resembled greatswords. He observed their position carefully and understood that they functioned much like a human's arms, but those tusks were far too hard to cut through with his weapon. so instead he aimed for the true weak point, the nose. In a swift, decisive motion, Jin's blade flashed forward, slicing cleanly across Mad Skull's face. Blood burst out instantly as the strike landed. The beast let out a piercing, agonized squeal, its entire body recoiling from the sudden pain. Its eyes twisted in rage and shock as it thrashed violently. Jin remained composed. He knew the pain from that wound would only worsen with every movement the beast made. The more it struggled, the more it would suffer, and soon it would no longer be able to keep attacking. He surged forward with unstoppable momentum. In a single fluid motion, his blade carved through the monster's flesh, drawing a violent spray of blood. Before the creature could even react, another strike followed, cutting deeper and faster, each blow landing with precise intent. The attacks came one after another, leaving Mad Skull no room to breathe, no time to recover. Jin's eyes remained cold and focused as he pressed forward. From that moment on, he made it clear, Mad Skull would not get a single chance to attack. Standing amidst the splashing blood, Jin's lips curled into a faint, confident smile, as if the outcome of the battle had already been decided. Just then, the group rushed out in alarm, their footsteps quick and tense. As they stepped outside, they were met with a scene of destruction, broken structures, scattered debris, and the aftermath of a fierce battle. Shock spread across their faces. They wondered what had happened out there, but without wasting time, they decided to find Jin first. Before they could move further, a red wolf stopped them. Their eyes widened in confusion as they tried to understand what it was. Both of them froze, their expressions filled with shock as they stared at the creature. The beast then let out a loud roar, its presence overwhelming, as if warning them not to interfere. The girl hesitated, wondering if the red wolf was telling them not to butt in. Just then, they noticed Jin coming outside. Seeing him, relief and disbelief filled their expressions. They exclaimed that Jin had made it back alive and quickly asked what had happened to Mad Skull. Jin looked at them calmly. Then, without hesitation, he told them that Mad Skull was no longer there. Confusion spread among the group as they struggled to understand his words. Jin's gaze remained firm as he added that now, it was just pork. Their eyes widened as they turned to look at the massive fallen body of the beast lying on the ground, lifeless. Shock quickly turned into amazement. They could hardly believe what they were seeing, questioning whether he had truly done it alone. None of them had ever heard of anyone taking down Mad Skull solo, and the realization left them completely stunned. Just as they were celebrating, the red wolf suddenly noticed something, letting out a weak, trembling sound as if something was not right. Jonathan nearby turned toward it, confusion flashing across his face as he tried to understand what was happening. At that moment, a deep rumble echoed from the tunnel. The ground seemed to vibrate as something massive began to emerge from the darkness. Slowly, another Mad Skull stepped out, its eyes glowing red, its tusks sharp, and its presence far more menacing than before. It let out a loud, piercing squeal, shaking the air around them. The realization hit instantly. Jonathan shouted in shock that it was Mad Skull. There was another one. Without hesitation, his expression hardened as he gripped his weapon tightly and shouted for everyone to get ready for battle. However, before they could charge at it, Claire suddenly stopped them, telling them to wait as she noticed something unusual about the beast. She pointed out that the creature had babies with it. From behind the massive body, two small pig-like creatures appeared, letting out soft squeaking sounds as they looked around nervously. The large beast lowered its head and gently nudged its young, letting out soft, protective grunts as the little one squeaked beside it. From a distance, the group watched as the creature slowly began to move away, guiding its babies carefully. Jonathan frowned slightly and wondered aloud if the beasts were trying to leave. Claire observed the scene quietly and suggested that they had likely planned to raise their young in that place. Hearing this, he admitted that he felt a bit conflicted, but at the same time he was relieved to see that the creatures were leaving peacefully. After that, the scene shifted to the 5th Pioneer City, where the streets lay calm and still. Inside a tavern, the atmosphere was completely different. The group had gathered around a table, celebrating their successful hunt. Jonathan raised his voice with excitement, praising everyone for their great work and expressing how happy he was. He proudly declared that they had taken down Mad Skull without anyone getting seriously hurt. With a wide grin, he announced that it was now time for the highlight of the hunt. He enthusiastically described it as the joy of labor and the reward of their hard work, calling for the moment of settlement. The room instantly erupted in cheers. The others raised their fists and shouted in excitement, their voices filling the tavern as they celebrated their victory together. As the rewards were placed on the table, Claire looked at the bags of coins with surprise. She wondered aloud if the reward was not supposed to be only 70 gold coins, noting that the amount in front of them looked far greater than that. Jonathan laughed confidently and explained that it was all thanks to him making a bit of a fuss. He told them that there had not been just one mad skull, but two, along with their babies. Since the situation had been far more dangerous than what they had originally been told, he had negotiated for a higher reward. Spreading his arms proudly, he revealed the final amount, 110 gold coins. The room immediately burst into laughter and cheers, the others praising him as their boss. However, Jin, standing with his arms crossed, questioned the situation. He pointed out that they had not even fought the mother and wondered how they still managed to get paid that much. At that, Jonathan hesitated slightly and admitted that he might have embellished the story a little. Hearing that, the others burst into laughter, praising him and joking that as long as he did not get caught, it would simply become the truth. Off to the side, Jin stood with his arms crossed, quietly observing the group. He let out a small breath and thought to himself that these people were quite entertaining. Suddenly, Jonathan spoke up again, drawing everyone's attention. Without hesitation, he declared that he was thinking of giving half of the profit to Jin and asked if anyone had any objections. At that moment, Jin was caught off guard, his eyes widening in surprise as he reacted to the unexpected offer. Jonathan smiled calmly and explained that if it were not for Jin, they would all be dead. He told him to accept it without hesitation. He then added that since the base reward had increased even after splitting it among everyone, there would still be more than enough for all of them. He made it clear that this was what everyone wanted as well. Around the table, the group nodded with cheerful expressions, fully agreeing with the decision as they continued celebrating. Meanwhile, Jin remained thoughtful. As he reflected on the battle, he realized that between the buffs and the traps, the others had actually helped more than he initially thought. Jin quietly observed the lively group and thought to himself that not everyone here seemed to be a bad person. He picked up his mug and joined the moment. With a grateful smile, he announced that in return he would cover all the drinks for the night. The room instantly burst into cheers. The others laughed loudly, praising him for knowing how to spend money, while some jokingly declared that they would make sure he spent every last coin. Soon the atmosphere turned even more chaotic as everyone raised their mugs and began drinking heavily, shouting for each other to drink like there was no tomorrow. Amid the noise, Jin noticed Claire getting up and going outside. His gaze followed the movement as he turned his head. Looking toward her, he called out and asked where Claire was going. Without stopping, Claire calmly replied that she was going to train her magic. Jin looked slightly surprised and questioned her words, wondering what she meant by magic training. Later that night, he found her outside, sitting quietly under the open sky. Claire remained still, her eyes closed as a faint blue aura surrounded her body. The energy flowed gently around her, as if responding to her breathing, creating a calm yet powerful presence. Watching from a distance, Jin realized that she must be exhausted. Even so, she continued training right after returning from a dangerous hunt. He couldn't help but feel impressed by her dedication, thinking that she was truly amazing. Leaning against a tree with his arms crossed, he kept observing her in silence. The soft glow of magic reflected in his eyes as he quietly muttered to himself, thinking about magic. After a moment, a thought crossed his mind. As he continued watching Claire's steady control over the flowing energy, he wondered if he should try learning magic as well. The next day, Claire looked at Jin with surprise after hearing that he wanted to learn magic. Without hesitation, she agreed and confidently told him that she could teach him herself. Jin was quietly surprised hearing this, as he did not think that she would accept far more easily than he expected. However, Claire revealed that she had already been planning to give him a gift anyway. She reminded him about the moment when Mad Skull had charged at them. Unlike certain people who only cared about themselves, Jin had stepped forward and saved her life. Because of that, she declared that teaching him magic was the least she could happily do for him. Nearby, Claire complained that if the mercenary group that cared more about fighting than protecting their own mage had asked for such a favor, she would have immediately refused. But Jin was different, and she repeatedly nodded while praising him. However, hearing these words, Jonathan quickly rejected the idea of rushing the training, telling Claire that Jin could not learn magic in just a single moment. He reminded her that they only had 2 days before leaving this town. However, Claire suggested that Jin should simply travel together with them, but Jonathan immediately rejected the idea. He argued that a powerful demon beast hunter like Jin had no reason to wander around with ordinary mercenaries like them. Placing a hand on Jin's shoulder, he declared that a truly brave wolf was always better off alone, and it would only insult someone as extraordinary as Jin if people like them tried to accompany him on such a grand journey. Jin listened quietly with a blank expression. Deep inside, he could only think that none of it was true. In reality, he did not really have anywhere to go. At the same time, he found it strange how the mercenary kept speaking dramatically, somehow making it sound as if Jin was already part of their group. After thinking for a moment, Jin decided that perhaps lying a little would make things easier. He calmly asked Jonathan where they were headed next. Jonathan answered that they were traveling to the 4th Pioneer City because he had heard rumors about a massive job waiting there. Hearing that destination, Jin's eyes shifted slightly. Coincidentally, that was also where he had been planning to go. With a calm voice, Jin admitted that he had intended to head toward the 4th Pioneer City as well, and asked if it would be alright for him to come along with them on the journey, and that he could simply learn magic while traveling along the way. However, his excuse sounded so forced that even Claire and Jonathan immediately realized how terrible the lie was. Even so, both of them secretly celebrated, feeling that they had successfully convinced a powerful ally to join their side. Jonathan burst into laughter and called it an incredible coincidence. He happily declared that having someone as strong as Jin travel with them would be a huge advantage for the group. Claire also looked delighted by the unexpected outcome. Jin could only give a faint smile in response. With that simple agreement, their next destination had finally been decided. Not long afterward, the group prepared for the journey and traveled aboard a massive demon beast used for transportation. The enormous creature slowly moved through the forest paths while carrying supplies and passengers on its back. The creature was known as a Taresk, a demon beast specially bred as a transport animal. Among all demon beasts, it was considered one of the rare few that humans had successfully managed to tame and use for travel. As Jin walked beside the enormous Taresk, he quietly observed the giant creature with curiosity. He recalled reading about the beast in field records before, but seeing it in person was completely different. The massive demon beast was far larger than he had imagined. From the way the mercenaries used it to carry cargo and people, it was clear that humans treated it like a pack animal instead of relying on horses. Just then, Jonathan cheerfully called for everyone to start moving, reminding the group that they still had a long road ahead of them. With that, the journey toward the 4th Pioneer City officially began. As time passed during the trip, Jin quickly realized that learning something entirely new was far more difficult than he expected. Night after night, he continued practicing under Claire's guidance, trying to understand the basics of magic. Although he came to understand that there were countless reasons why learning was difficult, the hardest challenge of all was persistent repetition. No matter what skill someone tried to master, true growth could only be achieved by repeating the same actions over and over again. As the training continued, Jin slowly began to feel stuck. Repeating the same exercises over and over again without seeing clear progress was painfully exhausting. Every attempt felt the same, and the constant plateau made the process even harder to endure. Even so, he was already used to this kind of pain. The endless repetition, the frustration, and the feeling of struggling without results were all things he had experienced countless times before. The 12 years he had spent surviving in the demon realm had forged his mind into something far tougher than ordinary people. Compared to the suffering he had endured there, this kind of training was nothing unbearable. Jin quietly focused his thoughts and continued practicing. In his eyes, the answer was simple. Keep doing it until it finally works. That persistence was something he understood better than anyone else. Then suddenly, a faint spark of blue mana flickered around him. Jin's eyes widened slightly in surprise as the glowing energy slowly responded to his control for the very first time. The moment the faint blue energy responded to Jin's control, Claire became excited. She quickly told him that he had finally succeeded in sensing magic. Hearing that, Jin looked at the glowing mana with surprise. He finally understood that the strange energy he had felt moments ago was mana itself. A faint smile appeared on his face as he admitted that it had taken him 10 whole days just to sense mana. Even for him, the process had been incredibly difficult. Hearing this, Claire laughed and honestly admitted that 10 days was actually quite slow. Still, she quickly reassured him that it was impressive nonetheless. She explained that there were many people who spent their entire lives without ever sensing mana, even if they possessed talent. Without wasting more time, she announced that it was time for the second step of the training. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out several small bottles filled with glowing blue liquid. Carefully, she poured the sparkling mana-infused substance into a shallow bowl and told Jin to take off his clothes. Hearing those unexpected words, Jin turned around in confusion, staring at her with a puzzled expression. Under the bright moonlight, Claire quietly dipped her finger into the glowing mana liquid. Jin watched carefully, still unsure about what she was trying to do. The next moment, she began drawing a large magical symbol across his back with the glowing liquid. Complex blue patterns and ancient-looking runes spread across his skin, shining brightly in the darkness. Shocked, Jin asked what exactly she was doing. Claire explained that she was creating a path that would allow mana to flow directly into his body. After finishing the magic circle, she stepped back and told him that everything was ready. The glowing symbol continued shining across Jin's back as the mage warned him to focus carefully. She explained that she was about to infuse his body with magic, so he needed to pay close attention to how the mana felt once it entered him. Jin took a deep breath and quietly nodded, telling Claire that he was ready. The glowing magic circle on his back immediately began to shine brighter as Claire activated the spell. A powerful surge of blue mana suddenly poured into his body. Energy rushed violently through him as streams of light surrounded his entire figure. Jin's eyes widened in shock while the mana spread across every part of his body like raging currents. The sensation was completely different from the faint mana he had sensed earlier. This power felt far stronger and far more intense. He could clearly feel a thick and overwhelming energy moving through him. It was heavier and denser than blood itself, spreading through every corner of his body. Just then, Claire asked Jin if he could feel the mana now. Sitting within the swirling blue energy, Jin slowly nodded and admitted that he could clearly feel something flowing throughout his entire body. Hearing his answer, Claire explained that he had just taken his very first step toward becoming a magic user. She revealed that magic was divided into 3 basic stages. The first stage was sensing mana, the second was containing that mana within the body, and the third was using that stored mana to cast magic itself. Since Jin had already succeeded in sensing mana, Claire decided it was time to move on to the next stage. She carefully controlled the flowing mana and began guiding it deeper into his body toward his heart. She instructed Jin to imagine it like holding his breath. She told him to focus and create a container inside his body where the mana could be stored safely. Jin focused intensely as sweat dripped down his face, trying to prepare his body to store mana. The energy flowing through him felt overwhelming, yet he continued concentrating without stopping. Seeing that he was ready, Claire declared that it was time to begin. Instantly, a massive surge of blue mana erupted around Jin. A glowing magic circle spread across his back as streams of energy burst upward like blazing flames. The pressure of the mana grew heavier and heavier while the surrounding air trembled violently. As Claire guided mana into Jin's body, strange visions suddenly appeared before her. In the darkness, horrifying insect-like creatures emerged, consuming other creatures. Glowing eyes stared directly at her while black shadows spread across the void like ink. The monstrous creatures screeched eerily as if trying to invade her mind. Seeing these horrifying visions, Claire felt a chilling sense of danger. Her eyes widened as an ominous feeling spread through her heart. Before she could fully understand what was happening, the mana around them began to spiral violently. Her mana was being absorbed directly into Jin's body. Sweat rolled down her face as panic filled her expression. She understood that if this continued, every bit of her mana would be completely drained away. However, before Claire's mana could be fully drained away, the red wolf intervened and lifted her body away, saving her. Sweat rolled down Claire's face as a thought crossed her mind. She wondered if the beast had stepped in because it sensed that she was in danger. Just then, Jin finally regained his senses and noticed Claire's exhausted condition. Shock filled his expression as he immediately called out her name. He quickly moved toward Claire and asked if she was all right after seeing how exhausted she looked. Claire was still breathing heavily, sweat running down her face as she tried to process everything she had just witnessed. In a shaken voice, she revealed that what she had seen was an inner world. She explained that an inner world was the form created by a person's power and nature, appearing like a world of its own. Depending on the kind of life someone had lived, the shape of that inner world would also become different. As Claire remembered the terrifying scene she had witnessed inside Jin's inner world, her expression slowly turned pale. Countless ominous eyes and monstrous creatures filled that dark world, radiating an overwhelming sense of dread. She could hardly believe that something so horrifying could exist within Jin's inner world. Claire stared at Jin with a serious expression and asked him to be honest with her. She asked Jin if he had ever eaten an inner core. Jin looked confused by the question and asked Claire what an inner core was. Claire then explained that an inner core was the crystal that only existed inside demon beasts. Hearing that explanation, Jin immediately realized what she meant. Calmly, he told her that she was referring to demon beast essence. Without thinking much of it, he admitted that he had eaten it before. The moment those words left his mouth, Claire's eyes widened in complete shock. She grabbed him by the shoulders and shouted in disbelief, asking if he had truly eaten inner cores. Her voice trembled as she urgently demanded to know when he had eaten them and just how many he had consumed. Jin scratched his head casually and explained that he had started eating the inner cores while hunting demon beasts. Since then, he had continued consuming them constantly for nearly 10 years. As for the number, he admitted that it was probably in the thousands, no, perhaps even tens of thousands. The moment Claire heard that, her face turned pale with shock. Jin looked at her in confusion and asked if there was some kind of problem. Claire immediately shouted that there was obviously a problem. Trying to calm herself, she explained the terrifying truth behind inner cores. According to her, whenever a human consumed inner cores, there were only two possible outcomes. They would either die or transform into a demon beast themselves. Hearing those words, Jin's eyes widened as a cold chill ran through his body. Karma, also known as retribution, was the name of the dark energy that existed within the demon realm. Any living creature that absorbed this sinister power would gain tremendous strength. However, that power came at a terrible cost. Over time, the accumulated karma inside the body would crystallize and form what was known as a mana core. The terrifying beasts of the demon realm carried these glowing cores deep within their bodies, overflowing with dark energy and corruption. Claire felt deeply unsettled after hearing Jin's story. The more she thought about it, the more terrifying it became. She remembered the existence of the dark priests. Back when the gate to the other world had opened and karma began spreading across the world, there were humans who worshipped the monsters that absorbed karma and called them angels. Those fanatics consumed mana cores themselves, believing that doing so would grant them greater power. Some even sacrificed other humans to the monsters in twisted rituals. In the end, they became nothing more than madmen consumed by darkness. Yet Jin had calmly admitted that he had been eating mana cores while hunting monsters for nearly 10 years. He even revealed that the number was not merely in the hundreds but likely in the thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands. Hearing that made Claire's unease grow even stronger. She wondered if Jin, who had been eating mana cores for years, could actually be a dark priest himself. However, she quickly rejected the idea. If he truly were one, he would never openly admit to eating mana cores, nor would he casually reveal the state of his inner world to someone else. Yet that only made the situation feel even stranger. Claire could not understand it at all. Even without knowing that mana cores were dangerous, why would someone willingly pick up and eat something so disgusting and repulsive? The more she learned about him, the more mysterious he seemed. Jin had simply watched monsters consume mana cores and copied them without hesitation, surviving for 10 entire years while doing something that should have killed him long ago. Unable to ignore it any longer, Claire firmly warned him that he needed to stop eating mana cores immediately. She explained that he had only survived until now through pure luck and that continuing any further could genuinely cost him his life. Jin fell silent after hearing her warning. He thought to himself that consuming mana cores either killed people or transformed them into monsters, yet he himself was standing right in front of her as proof that it was not always the case. That contradiction slowly stirred unease within his mind. For the first time, Jin seriously questioned himself. If Claire's words were true, then what about the strange emptiness he felt after killing people? What about the violent thrill and constant craving for battle that always burned within him? As those thoughts crossed his mind, Jin's expression darkened. A faint red glow appeared in his eye as a chilling possibility surfaced within him. Maybe the mana cores had already started changing him long ago. Jin casually replied that he would try to stop eating mana cores, but Claire immediately raised her voice and warned him not to brush the matter aside. She firmly told him that he absolutely had to stop because continuing down that path would place far more than just his life in danger. If he kept consuming mana cores, he would eventually lose the ability to use magic altogether. Hearing that, Jin suddenly froze in shock. For the first time since their conversation began, genuine panic appeared on his face. He quickly turned toward Claire and anxiously asked if it was true that he would no longer be able to use magic. Seeing his reaction, Claire could only stare at him in disbelief. She muttered that it was unbelievable how he seemed more worried about losing magic than losing his own life. Claire then calmly explained that, in his current condition, performing mana manifestation would already be extremely difficult. Still, she reassured him not to worry too much. Even if true magic became impossible for him, he could at least continue using mana arts. Jin tilted his head in confusion after hearing the term mana arts, clearly unfamiliar with it. Not long after, the two finally arrived at the fourth pioneer city. The city was crowded with people, and countless mercenaries had gathered around the central plaza beneath a towering angel statue. The atmosphere was noisy and tense, making it obvious that something major was happening. As Jin looked around at the enormous crowd, he admitted that he had never seen so many mercenaries gathered in one place before. Claire calmly replied that it was still too early for him to be surprised. She explained that the scale of the request was far greater than he imagined. The mission was so important that it was personally being supervised by a holy knight. Hearing that, the surrounding mercenaries could not hide their surprise as the pressure and seriousness of the mission became even more apparent. The crowd soon fell silent as a tall knight in shining silver armor stepped forward. His long silver hair swayed gently behind him while he carried an enormous sword at his side. The people immediately recognized him as Holy Knight Raymond, one of the church's strongest warriors. The moment Jin saw him, he was stunned. Even from a distance, Raymond gave off an overwhelming aura that completely surpassed that of every mercenary gathered there. Just a single glance was enough for Jin to realize that the Holy Knight was no ordinary person. As Jin continued observing the massive crowd, he asked whether it was always this crowded whenever a Holy Knight was on duty. Claire shook her head and explained that the reason so many mercenaries had gathered was because the request had come from the Golden Bug Wolf. Hearing that unfamiliar name, Jin tilted his head in confusion and asked if the golden bug was some kind of insect-type monster. Claire stared at him in disbelief before asking if he seriously did not know about the golden bug. Claire looked at Jin in disbelief and realized that he truly knew nothing except how to hunt monsters. Seeing his confusion, Jonathan, who was beside him, explained that the golden bug was the greatest ruler in the region. He was a king with enormous wealth and influence, making him the richest person around. However, the golden bug had suddenly died not long ago. Hearing that, Jin immediately wondered if the man had been murdered. Jonathan replied that there were indeed rumors like that spreading everywhere, but nothing had been officially confirmed yet. Jin then looked around at the massive gathering once again and questioned why so many people were still gathered there if the golden bug was already dead. Jonathan calmly explained that the golden bug had left behind 2 sons. Since Golden Bugwolf's 2 sons were inheriting his enormous estate, someone had to transport their wealth safely inside the barrier. Mountains of treasure, gold, and valuable assets would be moved, and that was the purpose of the current mission. Hearing that, Jin finally understood why such a huge number of mercenaries had gathered there. Transporting a lord's wealth was an opportunity too valuable to ignore. Just then, a voice suddenly called out for the Black Marlin mercenary group to step forward. Jonathan's eyes widened in excitement as he realized that it was finally their turn. Grinning confidently, he declared that this was the most important moment and quickly dragged Jin along with him, leaving Jin confused about what was happening. As they approached the front, Jonathan proudly introduced Jin to the Holy Knight. He declared that Jin was the key force of their mercenary group, the man who had captured Mad Skull and even tamed a werewolf. As Jin stood before the crowd, whispers immediately spread among the mercenaries. Some stared at him in surprise, asking if he was the rumored head crusher. Others looked doubtful, saying that he did not appear that strong at all. Hearing the strange nickname, Jin looked completely confused and asked what kind of nonsense it was supposed to mean. Jonathan smirked and quietly told him to just go along with it for now. He explained that the rumors only helped their group's reputation, so there was no reason to deny them. At that moment, Holy Knight Raymond coldly announced the Black Marlin mercenary group's reward. The group would receive 100 gold coins for the mission, and they were ordered to prepare for departure at dawn the next day. The announcement shocked everyone. Even Jin was surprised by the amount being offered simply for transporting cargo. Hearing this, Jin asked Jonathan in surprise if they would really earn 100 gold coins just for moving some cargo. Jonathan proudly explained to Jin that in this world payment was not based only on hard work. Half of the hiring fee came from the labor itself, while the other half depended on the reputation and name behind the mercenary group. Because of Jin's growing fame and the terrifying nickname people had given him, their group had managed to secure a much larger reward. Jin looked completely confused after hearing the nickname Head Crusher. He asked what it even meant. Jonathan then explained that people had started calling him that because he always crushed the heads of the monsters he fought. Hearing the absurd title, Jin could only stare blankly while thinking that whoever had come up with such a nickname had terrible taste. Still, after hearing that the mission alone would pay 100 gold coins, Jin realized that it was practically a jackpot. Even though he disliked the ridiculous reputation attached to him, he could not deny that such fame was proving useful for the mercenary group. As Jin thought about the enormous reward from the escort mission, he realized that the money would finally allow him to learn mana arts. A faint smile appeared on his face as determination filled his eyes. Later that night, at the mercenary group's headquarters, loud cheers and violent shouts echoed through the arena. Fighters clashed brutally in front of a roaring crowd as men screamed for blood and victory. Heavy punches landed with explosive force, sending one fighter crashing backward while the audience erupted with excitement. Watching the chaotic battles unfold, Jin calmly prepared himself. Just then, Claire asked him if he was truly certain about entering the arena. Jin tightened the bandages around his hands and replied that since the Holy Knights used mana arts, he would learn mana arts from them. His plan was simple. He intended to catch the attention of the Holy Knights and learn mana arts directly from them. Seeing the concern on Claire's face, he assured her that there was no need to worry because he already had everything planned out. According to the field records, Holy Knights were naturally drawn toward people who possessed overwhelming strength. Rumors even claimed that once they acknowledged someone's power, that person would receive favorable treatment from them. Knowing this information, Jin remained completely confident. For him, proving his strength would be the easiest part. He stepped into the arena without hesitation, his eyes sharp and focused as he faced the fighters before him. As the noise of the crowd echoed through the arena, Jin looked around calmly and thought to himself that this was the perfect place to build a reputation. If he displayed enough strength there, he was certain that he would eventually gain the attention of the Holy Knights. The opponent made his move first. The moment his opponent stepped forward, Jin instantly slipped past the incoming attack with calm precision. Before the man could react, Jin twisted his body and drove a sharp punch directly into his face. The impact exploded across the arena as blood sprayed from the fighter's mouth. But Jin did not stop there. He immediately grabbed the man by the head with one hand and violently slammed him headfirst into the ground, leaving him helpless beneath him. The spectators burst into laughter as they watched the brutal fight unfold. They shouted that the head crusher truly lived up to his name, while another fighter arrogantly declared that he would be Jin's next opponent. Jin ignored the noise around him and focused on the upper seats of the arena. There, the Holy Knight quietly observed the battle while drinking from a mug. Seeing that his gaze was fixed on him, Jin felt satisfied. He realized that he had finally caught the Holy Knight's attention. But Jin knew that this was far from enough. He could not afford to relax yet. This was only the beginning. Without hesitation, he launched another fierce attack, his fists and kicks striking with overwhelming force. In his mind, he clearly understood what he had to do. If he wanted the Holy Knight to truly acknowledge him and take him seriously, then defeating one or two fighters would never be enough. He needed to crush many more opponents in this arena. With that resolve burning inside him, Jin continued his relentless assault, slamming another fighter down with terrifying force as the crowd roared wildly around him. As the battle continued, Jin glanced toward the Holy Knight once again. He believed that after witnessing his strength, the man would naturally grow curious about where someone like him had come from. Jin stood calmly in the center of the arena while defeated fighters lay scattered around him. Even after taking down so many opponents, his expression remained steady and confident. In his mind, he believed that if he defeated dozens more fighters, the Holy Knight would no longer be able to ignore him. Looking directly toward the balcony where the Holy Knight stood, Jin silently made his judgment. If that silver-haired man was truly a real knight, then he would definitely recognize Jin's determination and talent after witnessing such overwhelming strength. After watching Jin defeat countless fighters in the arena, the silver-haired Holy Knight finally gave an order. Calmly, he instructed Rex to go down and fight that man. Hearing those words, Rex's eyes widened in disbelief. He immediately understood what his master intended. The Holy Knight had finally taken an interest in Jin and was preparing to send his own apprentice knight to face him directly. However, Rex could hardly accept it. In his mind, Jin was still nothing more than an ordinary mercenary. Meanwhile, Jin remained standing calmly in the arena, his gaze fixed on the balcony above. He knew that the moment Rex stepped forward, everything would truly begin. A faint red glow appeared in Jin's eyes as his expression turned sharp and determined. Without hesitation, he declared that he refused. To him, this was not simple pride or arrogance. This was the beginning of a negotiation. If he wanted to learn mana arts from the Holy Knight, he needed to force them to acknowledge his value first. Hearing Jin's refusal, Rex froze in shock, unable to believe what he had just heard. Clara and Jonathan stared in silence, unable to understand Jin's decision. The spectators were equally confused and wondered why he had refused the duel. The red-haired man became furious and shouted, demanding to know why Jin would not fight. Beside him, the Holy Knight remained calm and silently observed Jin. After a moment, he stepped forward and asked whether Jin had been injured somewhere. Jin raised his bandaged hand and calmly assured him that he was not hurt at all. Confused by his answer, the Holy Knight asked why he was still refusing the duel. Standing before them, Jin respectfully addressed the Holy Knight and explained that he was merely a mercenary who pursued money and power. For someone like him, fighting an apprentice Holy Knight without receiving anything in return was meaningless. Jin smiled confidently and suggested that they make a small bet. The Holy Knight immediately pointed out that both sides needed something they wanted for a bet to be meaningful. He then questioned whether the Holy Knights even wanted anything from someone like Jin. Jin calmly admitted that he might not be important enough to improve the reputation of their order. However, he explained that he possessed more money than he knew what to do with. To prove his words, he lifted a large bag filled with gold coins. The spectators burst into laughter and called him a lunatic. They could not believe he was trying to drag a Holy Knight, someone who lived and died by honor, into gambling. Many wondered how lightly Jin regarded the Holy Knights. The red-haired apprentice clenched his teeth in anger and cursed Jin under his breath. Before he could act, the Holy Knight placed a hand on his shoulder and stopped him. He declared that they did not need Jin's money. Instead, the Holy Knight proposed a different condition. He stated that no matter what injuries or damage occurred during the fight, they would not hold Jin responsible. The Holy Knight calmly confirmed that this was exactly what they wanted. Hearing that he would not be required to pay compensation for any injuries caused during the duel, Jin felt relieved. In his mind, that meant he could beat the red-haired apprentice without holding back. Jin smiled and accepted the condition. However, he added that he would reveal what he wanted only after the duel ended. Soon Jin and the red-haired apprentice stepped into the center of the arena and faced each other. The apprentice carefully wrapped his hands while glaring at Jin with intense hostility. Jin returned his gaze with a calm and serious expression. The spectators became excited and loudly encouraged the red-haired fighter, known as the Head Crusher. Some shouted that they had placed their entire fortunes on him. Behind Jin, Clara looked worried. She told him to give her a signal if the fight became too dangerous. Jin calmly assured her that she did not need to worry, declared that he was going to win. Meanwhile, the red-haired apprentice looked toward the Holy Knight and asked how seriously he should fight. The Holy Knight told him to use everything he had, warning him that Jin was not an easy opponent. The apprentice immediately understood. He clenched his fists as a powerful golden energy began swirling around his body. The spectators were shocked when they realized that he was using mana arts. Their excitement grew as they loudly cheered for the Holy Knight. Without wasting another moment, the red-haired apprentice rushed forward at incredible speed. Golden energy followed behind him as he rapidly closed the distance between himself and Jin, preparing to launch his first attack. As the red-haired apprentice closed in, Jin immediately realized that he was completely different from the weaker fighters he had faced before. His movements were clean, and every attack carried frightening power. The apprentice suddenly drove a powerful strike toward Jin. Sensing the danger, Jin narrowly avoided taking the full impact. He understood that if such an attack struck him in the wrong place, it could easily kill him. For the first time, Jin experienced the true power of mana arts. Instead of becoming frightened, he felt excited and found the battle thrilling. The red-haired apprentice continued his assault without giving Jin any time to recover. He raised his leg and brought it down with tremendous force. Jin quickly crossed his arms above his head to block the attack, but the mana-enhanced blow was far stronger than he expected. The impact exploded through the arena and sent Jin flying backward toward the edge of the battlefield. Jin steadied himself and wiped the blood from his mouth. The red-haired apprentice confirmed that his name was Jin before arrogantly declaring that although Jin might be a famous mercenary in the demon realm, he was still nothing more than a wild beast. He promised to make Jin regret looking down on a holy knight. The battle continued as the two exchanged fierce attacks. However, the spectators soon noticed something unexpected. The head crusher was gradually being pushed back. They were shocked that even an apprentice holy knight was struggling against Jin, while those who had bet on him began worrying that they would lose all their money. Watching from the side, the blonde woman became increasingly concerned for Jin. The white-haired holy knight remained silent, but his expression grew serious as he carefully studied the fight. The red-haired apprentice rushed forward again with mana surrounding his body. Jin raised his bandaged arms and calmly blocked the incoming attacks, refusing to be overwhelmed by their force. The holy knight soon felt that something was strange. When Jin had fought the other mercenaries, he had never dragged out the battles. He had defeated every one of them with a single blow. Yet this time, Jin was deliberately defending and allowing the fight to continue. Just then he noticed that Jin's movements were unusually restrained compared to his earlier fights. This made him suspect that Jin was hiding some kind of plan. At that moment, the red-haired apprentice roared and gathered an enormous amount of golden mana around his fist. He then charged forward and launched a powerful attack directly at Jin. Instead of dodging, Jin calmly raised his bare hand and struck the mana-enhanced fist aside. The deflected attack crashed into the edge of the arena, shattering the wooden structure and sending debris flying everywhere. The spectators were stunned. Some shouted that Jin had lost his mind for not avoiding such a dangerous attack, while others could hardly believe that he had slapped away a holy knight's mana art with his bare hand. Even Jin's companions stared at him in shock. However, Jin remained calm despite the blood dripping from his body. He smiled and declared that he had already seen enough to measure the apprentice's combat power. Jin then clenched his fist and announced that it was time to test the apprentice's durability. Jin suddenly rushed forward and delivered a simple but powerful punch directly into Rex's body. The impact forced Rex to the ground, leaving him gasping in pain and shock. The white-haired holy knight watched with disbelief. Rex had only taken an ordinary punch, yet his expression showed that the blow had caused tremendous damage. At that moment, the holy knight finally understood the truth. Jin had not been holding back because he was preparing some clever trick. He had merely been enjoying the battle and allowing it to continue for longer. Jin looked down at the injured Rex with an excited smile. He remarked that although he had struck him quite hard, Rex was still conscious and able to endure it. Jin wondered whether his impressive durability was also the result of his mana arts. Growing even more curious, Jin clenched his bandaged hands and asked how many more of his attacks Rex could withstand. Before Jin could continue the fight, the white-haired holy knight quickly stepped between them and caught the injured Rex. He declared that the duel was over because Rex had already lost. The holy knight reminded Jin that they would grant the request they had promised him. With the winner decided, he said there was no reason to continue the battle. Jin remained silent, feeling slightly disappointed. He had only just begun enjoying himself, so the sudden end of the fight ruined his mood. However, the duel had achieved its true purpose, and his plan had worked. The spectators erupted into loud cheers for Jin, proudly shouting the Head Crusher's title. Those who had supported him celebrated his victory, and claimed that they had always known he would succeed. Later that night, the scene shifted to the Golden Bugwolf's estate. Inside the luxurious mansion, Golden Bug's two sons were having a feast. The first son, Derek, sat beside his younger brother Cedric. The table and floor were covered with leftover food as the two brothers continued eating carelessly. Derek angrily asked whether it would really take 10 full days for them to enter the barrier. He cursed the Church Alliance and complained that despite the enormous amount of money they had invested, they still had to wait so long. Cedric bitterly replied that this was simply how the Church Alliance operated. In his opinion, they were always full of promises but rarely produced any real results. However, he soon became worried and asked whether they would truly be able to survive until the barrier opened. Derek had no answer. He said there was nothing else they could do except wait and hope that their bodies endured for another 10 days. Both brothers were suffering from a horrifying condition. Large clusters of glowing blue lumps covered their swollen bodies, pulsing and trembling as though something were growing beneath their skin. A white-haired holy knight stood quietly beneath a large tree and focused on practicing his mana arts. He calmly controlled the flow of mana through his body, treating it like a natural part of himself. By doing so, he strengthened both his body and his sword. It was said that anyone with some talent could learn mana arts. However, a person's strength depended on how skilled they became. At the highest level, even a basic technique was said to possess enough power to split mountains and seas. The knight then demonstrated a technique called Sacred Fire Slash. Golden mana surrounded his sword as he swung it with perfect control. A powerful shockwave burst forward with a loud explosion, sending birds flying from the surrounding trees. After witnessing the attack, a fellow holy knight named Rex excitedly praised him. He called him Lord Raymond and said he was amazing, the shining hope of all holy knights. Rex admired him so much that he wondered how anyone could be so perfect and tried to continue praising him, but Raymond calmly interrupted him and simply told Rex to back off. Rex cheerfully saluted Raymond and promised to keep working hard before leaving. Jin watched the scene and felt that Rex's behavior seemed strangely familiar. He then wondered whether Raymond had truly used a proper mana art. Although the technique looked stronger than the one the apprentice knight had demonstrated before, Jin believed someone as skilled as Raymond should have been able to produce that much power even without a special technique. Raymond noticed Jin's thoughts and told him that he had already demonstrated the technique once, so Jin should focus on his training. Jin agreed. Raymond then began teaching Jin the basics of mana control. He explained that when a person flexed an arm, the veins became visible and the muscles tightened. In the same way, mana should be gathered and held inside the muscles. As Jin listened, he realized that this method was similar to what Claire had taught him before. He immediately followed Raymond's instructions. Suddenly, a large amount of mana began flowing through his body. Jin was shocked and wondered when he had gained so much mana. The mana flowed gently and calmly through him. As he sensed its familiar presence, Jin realized that the mana inside him belonged to Claire. Raymond instructed Jin to slowly consume the mana flowing inside his body. He explained that moving his body at first would make it easier to control the mana. Before Raymond could finish his explanation, he suddenly noticed something unusual. Jin's body became surrounded by a dark purple aura as he instinctively began using mana arts. Raymond was shocked. He could not believe that Jin had successfully used mana arts immediately after learning the technique. However, what surprised him even more was the strange and ominous mana surrounding Jin. Raymond knew that the color and form of mana arts were influenced by a person's mental world. Even so, the mana flowing around Jin felt incredibly dark and unsettling, unlike anything Raymond had ever sensed before. Staring at Jin with a serious expression, Raymond wondered what kind of power was hidden inside him. He could not understand what was truly dwelling within Jin. Jin continued practicing mana arts as the dark purple aura wrapped around his body and sword. He repeatedly swung his weapon, testing the flow of mana. Although the attacks worked, he felt they were not very efficient for the amount of effort they required. Even so, Jin was thrilled. He thought the power was incredible and became excited to try it in a real battle. Meanwhile, Raymond continued watching him in shock. He could hardly believe that Jin had already learned to use mana arts after only a single lesson. Raymond understood that the appearance and color of mana arts reflected a person's mental world. The dark purple aura surrounding Jin felt unusually ominous, making him wonder what kind of terrifying power was hidden inside him. Despite its poor efficiency, Jin enjoyed using the technique and looked forward to mastering it. Sometime later, Claire happily told Jin that he had already mastered mana arts. She praised him, saying it could not have been easy and that his achievement was amazing. Jin smiled and sincerely thanked Claire. He told her that he had only been able to master mana arts because of her guidance. Jin asked Claire if she was really okay. He explained that when she had helped him before, it had felt as though her mana had entered his body, and he was worried that it might have affected her. Claire smiled gently and assured him that she was completely fine. She reminded Jin that he had saved her life before and told him to think of it as a small gift in return. Although Jin accepted her answer, he still felt that something was unusual. The amount of mana that had entered him seemed far too great to ignore. At the same time, he realized that the experience had allowed him to learn mana arts much faster than normal. Just then, Raymond, who had been quietly watching, mocked Jin. He sarcastically remarked that Jin was acting as though learning the basics of mana arts was some incredible achievement. Before Jin could respond, Rex interrupted. He told Jin not to slack off during his training and said he should be grateful that Lord Raymond had taken time out of his day to teach someone like him. Jin looked at Rex with annoyance and wondered why he was talking so much nonsense. He quickly guessed that the man was still bitter about losing to him the previous day. Instead of getting upset, Jin smiled. Since he had been getting bored anyway, he decided it was the perfect chance to bruise the man's pride and pick another fight. As Jin prepared to challenge Rex, Raymond suddenly slapped the man's horse. Startled, the horse let out a loud neigh and bolted away, carrying its rider with it before he could react. Watching the man disappear, Jin clicked his tongue in disappointment. Raymond apologized and asked Jin to understand. He promised that he would keep the hot-headed man under control, leaving Jin thinking that it was a shame he had lost the chance to teach him a lesson. Just then, Raymond suddenly shouted at everyone. A loud crash echoed from the distance as dishes and food were thrown everywhere. An angry voice demanded that the servants bring food faster because they were hungry. Jin looked toward the commotion and asked what was happening. Raymond calmly explained that it was nothing unusual. According to him, the employers were simply throwing another tantrum. Jin asked if the employers were the sons of the Golden Bug. Raymond confirmed that they were. Since the Golden Bug wolf had died, the brothers had done nothing but eat non-stop. If their meals were delayed even for a moment, they would throw childish tantrums like the one happening now. Raymond advised Jin not to worry about the employer's behavior. He explained that caring about them would only bring trouble, so the best choice was to ignore them. However, Jin was not convinced. He felt that calling it simple stress-induced binge eating was strange. A bad feeling began to grow inside him. As the two brothers continued stuffing themselves with food, they felt an even stronger hunger instead of becoming full. The more they ate, the more intense the craving became. It was as if something inside them was growing stronger with every bite. Suddenly, one of the brothers let out a painful scream. His body began to swell and twist in a horrifying way. Jin immediately realized that it looked as though a monster was about to burst out from inside him. A moment later, a massive creature suddenly exploded out of the man's body with a terrifying roar. The violent eruption destroyed everything around it, leaving Jin and Raymond shocked as they stared at the monstrous creature. Jin could only wonder what had just happened. The giant Tarrasque suddenly let out a deafening roar and began thrashing around wildly. The people nearby panicked as they watched the enormous creature go out of control. They shouted that the Tarrasque carrying their clients had suddenly started rampaging. Raymond immediately realized that the strange transformation was connected to the Golden Bug's sons. Without wasting a second, he called for Rex and ordered him to prepare for battle. Rex quickly answered that he understood. Raymond drew his sword as golden energy surrounded his body. He declared that the client's safety was the highest priority and ordered Rex to calm the Tarrasque, even if it meant killing it. Rex acknowledged the command and charged toward the raging beast. As the Tarrasque continued smashing everything in its path, something even more horrifying happened. Thick black tentacles suddenly burst out from its body, twisting and writhing in every direction. The creature let out a terrifying screech as it transformed into an even more monstrous form. Claire looked at the horrifying creature in shock and asked if it was an abomination. Jin asked what an abomination was. She explained that an abomination was a human who had turned into a monster because of the demonic realm's karma. Jin repeated her explanation in his mind and realized that an abomination had once been a human. At that moment, Raymond rushed toward the monstrous creature without hesitation. He unleashed a powerful technique called Sacred Fire Slash. A massive blade of golden energy cut straight through the monster's body, slicing it open with tremendous force. However, the attack failed to stop the creature. Raymond immediately shouted for Rex. Before Rex could react, one of the monster's giant tentacles lashed out toward him at high speed. Rex cried out in alarm as the deadly attack rushed toward him. Rex reacted quickly and swung his sword, cutting through the monster's giant tentacles one after another. The severed pieces crashed to the ground, but to everyone's horror, the monster's body immediately began regenerating. Raymond was shocked and realized that the creature had completely restored itself. He quickly shouted for Rex to stop, but it was already too late. As Rex looked up, he saw the monstrous abomination standing directly behind him. Its terrifying face stared at him with glowing red eyes. Rex gritted his teeth and realized he was in grave danger. In the next instant, the monster launched a devastating attack. Blood splattered through the air as the powerful strike landed. Raymond desperately called out Rex's name, fearing the worst as his companion was struck down.